Hi guys, I'm here with Paul Mortimer, expert on the Sutton Hoo finds, and we've got here a recreation of the, well, what do we call it? That's the point of this video. The axe-like object that was found in Sutton Hoo ship burial, and essentially it's the only thing like this that's been found in any English or Anglo-Saxon.
Not entirely. There's been nothing exactly the same. It's often called the Sutton Hoo axe hammer, presumably because it's got a hammer bit and an axe bit at the top.
Hammer?
There's something vaguely similar from a grave in Howletts in Kent, but it is actually quite different from this. Unfortunately, when this was found, it wasn't conserved terribly well. So, but it is quite distinctive in that it has a round shaft which tapers and changes into a rectangular shaft, which is a bit odd. And it's got this gimbal, this free-running gimbal at the end. But what is it?
So first of all, it is heavy, okay? I've got various warhammers and maces and stuff. This is heavier. This is, well, I don't know how much it weighs. It must weigh about 5-6 pounds.
About that, yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty heavy object. So we've got, there's the head of the thing. This is a blade of sorts, not unlike certain other kind of axe blades used at the time, but then it's got a solid rectangular section hammer at the back. This has essentially a tang going through and is peened at the end with what's essentially a washer at the top and a washer at the bottom. Rectangular bar section down to a certain point, and then it's cylindrical, and then at the end the gimbaled kind of lanyard ring essentially. Yeah. Well, presumably, is that ring surviving on the original? Yeah. So we've got a ring there, but we don't know what was attached to the ring, or, I mean, at first sight that appears like a lanyard thing, you know, to put a wrist strap through for retention, which it may be. We don't know, first up, we don't know whether it's a weapon or a tool or a symbol of something.
I don't think it's a very practical weapon. It
seems very heavy for the size.
And if you tried to use it in any sort of fast-moving, flowing situation, I don't think you'd be very successful. I think you'd be killed. I tend to think it's a pole axe. It's used for killing animals with that end.
So I should just throw in, so most of you watching this will think of poleaxe as a 15th century pole weapon. The term poleaxe actually comes from head axe, and the pole was the hammer end. And the original poleaxe was for killing cows and pigs. So you'd tie it down and you'd hit them in the head with the hammer end, and you'd use the axe side for butchering up the body. And in fact, archaeologically there are bodies of pigs and cow skulls that have got a very clear square hole through the skull where you can see how they were killed by the butcher or by the farmer. So this could be a ritual, could be representative of...
There is one bit of evidence. A bead tells us that Radwold, and it may not be Radwold in the grave, but it could be King Radwold, King of the East Angles, who died in AD 625, or thereabouts. He went to Kent and he was apparently converted to Christianity, and on his return his wife dissuaded him from turning all his people into Christians and said that he ought to keep to the old religion. And Bede tells us that he had 2 altars, one for Christ and one for sacrificing animals to devils, and perhaps this is the thing that he used to sacrifice big animals to devils. Who knows?
But like Paul says, it's for a weapon. I mean, essentially it could be used one-handed or two-handed. It would be strange to have a two-handed weapon in this era, in the era of large shields. But equally, if it were a two-handed weapon, you'd expect it to be longer. It's not very long for a two-handed weapon, and it's almost a bit too long for a one-handed weapon.
Yeah.
So it's also a strange...
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
It's a strange length. Also, if you wanted a two-handed or one-handed war axe, or whatever you want to call this, why have an iron shaft?
Absolutely.
It makes the weapon kind of 3 times heavier than it needs to be. You have a wooden shaft, and so it's very strange. It has, but I have to say, even if it's for killing animals, why have a metal shaft? If we just grab this Franciscus. And I mean, that's a more normal looking axe for this period, whatever length shaft you have it on. You want the momentum to be at the hitting end, and actually what you're doing by having an iron shaft is you're reducing the hitting end momentum, because you're reducing the speed that you can move it at, and you're introducing a lot of weight at the back end. So it's a very, very strange object, and I think the jury's really still out, isn't it, on what it is. I think there's one theory that's been around for a few years, that it's as kind of horseman's weapon, saddle axe. Who knows? I mean, there was horse-related paraphernalia, was there?
Well, there are bits of horse in the grave, but there's no bridle or anything. But there is in a grave not very far away, Mount 17, the horseman's grave. He was buried with his horse, and he had a bridle with that. But who knows? Yeah,
I mean, from looking at it from a later medieval perspective, this is not dissimilar as an object to some later horsemen's axes and warhammers, but they were in the context, they came about in the 15th century, the all iron, all steel ones came about in the 15th century, in a context of heavy plate armour, not something that existed in this period. And why would you need an all iron or all steel horseman's axe at this period? It doesn't seem to fit with either the armour or the type of warfare that was happening. But
I mean, if it was a saddle axe, using it from a horse would be very dangerous for the horse.
More like to hit the horse, I was saying. And again, we come back to the question of why have an iron shaft when you can have a wooden shaft? It doesn't seem to. So it's a very, very strange object, and the short story is no one really knows. There are many theories as to what it is and what it was for. And I have to say also, compared to the quality of all the other stuff in Sutton Hoo, it seems very crudely made. It looks blacksmith made rather than weaponsmith made. So it looks to me more like a tool than a weapon, because the weapons in that era seem to, even the spears, you know, they seem to be so finely made, and yet they make this relatively crudely.
I don't know. I don't think it's a weapon. I'm pretty keen on the idea it's a poleaxe, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, so there we go, guys. It's a very curious object, and I'm sure there'll be more written about it in coming years. So we're looking forward to reading more theories, and maybe if one turns up in another grave at some point, that might be the only kind of thing that ever gives us any more information to guess what it is.
Anybody out there has got any ideas?
Post underneath if you you think. And one other thing, in this era in Italy, Longobard did have axes which had a hammer on the back, but they're very different to this. They have wooden shafts, and often they're quite ornate, and they have brass inlay and gold inlay and all sorts. And they're a different shape to this, and they have quite a long cutting edge, as you'd expect of a fighting axe, whereas this has a small kind of, it's a tomahawk-like axe. But yeah, it's very different to the Longobard axes. But anyway, cheers guys, thanks Paul.
Cheers.
Click subscribe now and also follow us on Facebook.